Hi guys, it's Misty from the Book Rat, and I've got some more Fairy Tale Fortnight goodies for you. This time it is a review of Stolen Songbird by Danielle L. Jensen, which you guys voted for in Stack of 5. I already told you briefly in my Rewind the month I read it that this was a big thumbs up for me, so now I'm going to tell you why. The full synopsis of the book as well as links can be found below, so you can check that out there, and I'm going to get straight into it. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what it was that I loved so much about Stolen Songbird. Largely, I think it was just the right book at the right time. I was a little bit in a funk and it just worked for me. All the pieces really gelled. But it's one of those books where you don't necessarily have big atypical things to point out of this is why this book worked or this is what this book did differently. It's more that it has a lot of really smart choices and layers of little things working together to just make it work and make it flow and be enjoyable, and a well-written, engaging fantasy. I have to say it was engaging right from the start and pretty much straight through. I can't really think of any point in the book that it didn't appeal to me and didn't make me want to keep reading it. I mentioned in my rewind that it was the type of book that I was really sad when I was done with it. I was at work and I was thinking, ooh, I'm gonna go home and finish reading Stolen Songbird, and then I remembered that I had finished it the night before and I was just like, man, I wanted back in that world. I wanted to get back to those characters and how their relationships were developing and exploring the world building and the dynamics, and I was disappointed when it was over, and I'm glad that it's part of a series because I definitely want book 2 as soon as possible. Now. It is a high fantasy. It's about trolls in this sort of underground world, sort of Lost City, Atlantis style, but not underwater obviously, under a mountain. Though I feel like it's a world that we've probably seen before. We've seen these ornate lost cities in other books, and we've seen cities under mountains and cursed cities and things like that. Each world is its own thing and it needs to be built to the best of the writer's ability. It needs to be engaging and fascinating and something that I would want to literally explore, something that I would want to see in real life, or just something that feels fleshed out enough that I can see it in my mind, and Troyes definitely was that. It's a fully realized city with its own set of rules that are followed through, and that's really important in a fantasy. Throughout the book, throughout the world building, things make sense. There are a set of laws, and the culture and the physics and the history that goes into building a world and making it a fully realized place, and I thought that Jensen did a really good job of that. It was something I could see in my head, but it was also something that these characters fit into. It made sense. I could see the backstory, I could see how this world has changed and how it will continue to change. I could see how it was representative of its people and they of it, and I enjoyed how the main character Cécile fit into that world or didn't fit into that world, the ways that she clashed and the ways she had to adapt to it. It all made sense. It followed forms that we're familiar with and expanded on them and just made a really solid world for these characters to interact in. It's somewhat French inspired, as is the whole book, but it is its own distinct high fantasy thing, and it really worked. And speaking of the character interactions, I think they're a big part of what made me love this book so much, and they just really are spot on. So you have a character who the story could quickly derail into cliche territory. She's talented, she's pretty, she's apparently been prophesied, and you're just waiting for her to be very boringly typical and Mary Sue, and she's not. She reacts in ways that you believe to her world and to her situation. She is strong-willed and a fighter, but she still doesn't let that close her off. You know, she does open herself up to the world and the experience and be smart about it. Look at her options, look at the realities of her world, and make her decisions based on that. And it made her a much more believable, strong character, which also helped in her interactions with the people of Troyes. I thought all of the relationships really worked. There's a lot of different layers to the story and to the interactions. There's political intrigue and, you know, the good characters, the bad characters, the in-between, people you're not sure you can trust, and the people that you're pleasantly surprised that you can trust. It's sort of got all of those different elements working, and the ways that their characters and the relationships are kind of opened up as you go feels really natural, feels really organic, and adds a really, really solid base to the story that just pulls the reader in. It makes you connect to these characters. It makes you want to see things turn out their way and want to root for them. They have their frustrating moments, they have their moments of beauty, and they just feel really full and authentic, which is always a huge, huge plus in this type of story. Every story is dependent on its characters in large part because that's what pulls a reader into the story and makes them go with it, but especially in fantasy where you can get very distanced and you can get very bogged down, you need those characters that are going to make you connect to this world and characters that you can view it through their eyes and believe their interactions, and Jensen did that really well. And along those same lines of not being bogged down, it's always a huge risk and very common in high fantasy to have these massive info dumps that introduce you to the world and the characters and the history and the magic and whatever else the author feels you need to know right now. It's one of the things that puts a lot of readers off when it comes to high fantasy or fantasy in general, or writing in general, because it's obnoxious and just too much and we don't want it. Jensen did a really good job, I think, of not being info dumpy. I really don't remember a single instance where she overloads the reader with things that they don't need to know, or runs the risk of the opposite happening and having the reader be confused because they don't have enough information to understand their world. She works things in really skillfully, she reveals them at the right time, and she trusts the reader to pick everything up and understand the world and the characters and the dynamics and what's going on, which speaks highly of her writing and of her faith in the reader, which if you don't trust your reader's not going to trust you and they're not going to stick with you. So as I said, it's a lot of little things that just work in harmony with each other and push all the right buttons. It's not these huge things that stand out. I think the reader's never necessarily going to be surprised too much by things that happen. You know these characters, you know these motivations, you kind of know how the story's going to unfold, but it's the watching it unfold. It's the getting drawn into a solid story well told that avoids a lot of the pitfalls and cliches and builds a really strong world and characters for you. That's where the strengths of the story are, and that's where Jensen really shines. And I generally just couldn't be more pleased with the book or want book 2 more. If you hadn't heard of this one or were curious about it, I would highly recommend picking it up. And if you have read it, let me know what you think. I'm gonna bet that you're probably eagerly awaiting book 2, just like I am. And that is what I thought of Stolen Songbird by Danielle L. Jensen, which is out now. That is all for this Fairy Tale Fortnight review. There is plenty more going on in Fairy Tale Fortnight, so make sure you stop over to the blog, links are below, or if you would like more Fairy Tale Fortnight videos, you can check out this playlist. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and until then, that's all for now. Thanks for watching and happy reading! And as I've said a time or two, I like trolls. There's really no way to explain it or reasoning, I like trolls.